Outside Rome, former soldiers of Sulla were waiting in an army camp in Etruria. Their finances were mostly brought to ruins, equally through extravagance, as through agricultural ineptness. Hoping to gain a quick fortune in league with their leader Manlius, one of Sulla's officers emeritus and supporter of Catilina. The Senate, initially inactive after hearing the first rumors end of September, issued the most far-reaching Senate resolution on October 21, effectively declaring a state of emergency after the first confirmed reports of a troop buildup had reached its ears. A little later, on November 7, an assassination attempt on Cicero fails, since he had informants within Catilina's ranks. The plan was to have Cicero assassinated during his morning greeting, performed by two knights in league with the rebels. The would-be assassins had to leave without accomplishing their dire deed, since Cicero had put his house under guard. Fully aware of what almost would have transpired, Cicero delivered an impromptu, his famous first, speech against Catilina to the Senate the day after, still attended by Catilina himself. Cicero's words prompted Catilina to leave the city the following night, ostensibly to go into exile in Massilia, but in reality to travel to Manlius' army camp, in Etruria. When the Senate learns of this, it declares both Manlius and Catilina enemies of the state, making them outlaws. It is now every Roman citizen's solemn duty to do them harm or kill them, if they are able. Meanwhile, Catilina's supporters in Rome approached an envoy of the Allobroges. This Gallic tribe was in the city to negotiate a debt settlement with the Senate. They were to make common cause with Catilina. After the Roman people were to be slaughtered, the city needed new inhabitants as well as good fighters. The Allobroges seem to agree but are in constant contact with Cicero. After incriminating documents are handed over to the Allobroges, a fictitious raid takes place on December 3, placing these documents in Cicero's hands. They were presented to the Senate. All suspects at hand brought forward, convicted, and executed, on December 5, 63 BC. The rest of the rebels are given a choice: surrender within a specific deadline without penalty, or be enslaved or die. Enslaved people, who had joined Catilina for reasons only too understandable, would be rewarded 100,000 denarii, as well as their freedom, if they decided to turn their backs on him. For free people, even 200,000 denarii were promised. However, this generous offer was not taken up often. It can be assumed that the Allobroges received advantages in their negotiations. The Senate decreed that Cicero shall keep the city safe. At the same time, his colleague, Gnaeus Pompey, the later Magnus, set off with an army toward Manlius and Catilina, to add their petty band of rebels to Pluto's collection of fallen fighters. The two armies meet. Catilina, and the bulk of his 3,000 followers fall. The few survivors, and their co-conspirators caught in the city, are brought before the courts, in the spring of the same year. Catilinarians to revise their court proceedings, but was later rehabilitated by Caesar. Further worth mentioning is the discussion within the Senate House, in which Caesar and Cato have their say. One can only be amazed when one considers how mature Roman law was at that time. For example, the laws of Valerius gave every citizen the right to appeal to the people against the punishment of execution, or scourging. The Porcian law forbade the death penalty altogether, and replaced it with banishment. Death penalty. Allegedly, because living in exile disgrace was a much worse punishment. And so it happened, that one of the greatest dangers the late Republic had ever faced, could be averted. For the time being, at least. Considering the second half of the 1st century BC, when the first triumvirate was formed a little later, and Caesar crossed the Rubicon soon after.